betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. The Bet with the Best podcast is sponsored by Amwager, an ADW built by horse players for horse players. Speed, power, and ease of use are at the core of Amwager, designed to give players the information and tools they need to quickly make anything from a simple win bet to a complex, structured superfecta or pick 5 wager. When you combine that with data and pool updates that are up to 60 times faster than the competition, Amwager is the clear winner in wagering on races online. Those are just a few of the many special features that Amwager has to offer, along with live video and race replays, free, integrated form-to-win past performance information, conditional wagering, and true odds, which are a prediction of off odds based on all available pool data. That and much more. Amwager is licensed and operated in the U.S., and best of all, they will actually pay you to play. If you sign up now and deposit and bet $150, you will earn a $150 lump sum bonus. So there is no reason not to give Amwager a try. If you want to bet with the best, then you need the best tools to wager with. You need Amwager. Welcome to episode 20 of the Bet with the Best podcast. Joining us this week is longtime Southern California horse player, a person who you may have seen if you've ever had the pleasure and opportunity to spend some time out in the Eddie Logan suite at beautiful Santa Anita Racetrack. I want to introduce Leo Vukmanovic. Welcome to the show, Leo. How's it going?
It's going outstanding, Chris, and pleasure to be on your podcast. Looking forward to having a good conversation with you today.
Yeah, I love it when I have a guest on who's listened to the show before, so you kind of know it's just a conversation, and we never know where it's going to lead. I'm going to let you kind of take it where you want it to go, but I always try to start by having the guests give a what I call their horse player origin story, how they got started in this crazy game, and kind of how that evolved to where you are today. So why don't you please share with us your horse player origin story?
Yeah, for sure. I was destined to be a horse player or a racetracker at a very young age. I grew up in a city called Elhammer, which is about 7 miles from Santa Anita Racetrack, and just growing up as a young kid, like, you know, when you used to go exchange your bottles and hustle some money, the liquor store that I used to go to, when you would walk into it, it had all the racetrack publications outside, all the newspapers, and this is at a young age, probably around 10 years old, that I can remember. And then when you walked inside, you were in awe because there was nothing but winner's circle pictures across the whole top, all the way around the liquor store, and they weren't small pictures. They were like big size pictures, like 17 by 24, and so I kind of was in awe of the pictures, and I would go in there and look at them all the time. And then my sister, her brother-in-law was a professional horse player, so when he lived over in more near towards Hollywood Park. So when I would go and visit there, I would go into his office, and he had stacks and stacks of publication. And then turned out my best friend growing up, his dad was a horse player, and all of his brothers were. And then to top it off, my uncle was a horse owner, and obviously a horse player. And I can remember as early as around 11 years old, I used to take the bus to my uncle and aunt's house on the weekend, and then my aunt would pick me up, part of the way, and I would go to their house, and then I would go to the barns with my uncle at a very young age. So I got used to the racetrack, and I loved the atmosphere. I loved being there, and I loved being around the horses, and I got hooked right away. And then when we were young, we were so young, I would go to the track with my best friend and his dad, and we were like 11 when we started going, and then as we got into our younger teenage, we would go, and then we started betting, and we were like in our early teens, 13 or 14, and at that time we were able to make bets, but it was really hard to cash tickets. But we had an in with one of the security guards, and anytime we would go to the window and we'd be able to bet. But if we cashed, sometimes we would go up to the window to cash, and the tellers would never let us cash. But so we would ask somebody, hey, can you cash this ticket? And it'd be like a $2 win, $2 place bet. And then sometimes the guys would take off with our money, and then we would track them down. And there was this guard, Mr. Johnson, and he would tap them on the shoulder. Did you take these kids' money? And he would get our money back. And then we started going by ourselves when we were 15 and 16. And then at the time, Santa Anita, you had to go in with an adult. So we would ask an adult, hey, can we go in with you? And then we even found some places where we could sneak in. So, we weren't too serious of a horse players, but we loved going. And there was a bunch of us. And then in the summertime, what we used to love playing sports. We would go to, the park that we would play at. And then at about 5:30, we would stop and we would listen to the race recreations. There was a program called Horse and Jockey, and there was a gentleman named Jay Richards, and he would give the race calls for all the races for that day. And then we'd get a newspaper, and we'd take turns who got to bet first, and then we would gamble, 10 cents, 25 cents a race, and then we were done. We'd go back to playing our sports all day long. So, like I said, I was destined to be a race tracker, and then it got more serious when I got when I became 18 years old, and had a group of friends that I would always go to the racetrack with, and I still go to the racetrack with to this day. So that's how it started, Chris.
So I was just curious on your race recreation thing. Did you ever anybody ever pull off a sting where they actually knew who won before you heard the race recreation? Cleaned up on the day.
I think there was a lot of past posting, because during the day there was on KNX radio they had the race results on there, and I'm sure there was always somebody trying to pick up and pass post. But the challenging things, we were always at the park pretty early, and we'd take all the gear. We'd start with baseball, and then we'd play football. And then at night, we would pick the lock. We figured out a way to take the screws off the lock, so we could turn the lights on and play basketball at night. So we were diehard athletes at that time. So we had a lot of fun doing that.
So you were introduced at a pretty early age. You hung around the track quite a bit in your youth. So how did that evolve into actually being a serious horse player? How did you get from, okay, we go and hang out at the track when we're in high school, to, now you're hanging out, firing away at the Eddie Logan suite on a regular basis?
So when I got to be about 17 or 18, it got pretty serious. And I had a friend, I actually give his name, Jeff Day, and he's known at the racetrack as the banker. And what we were able to do was we were able to really start hanging around some people that were in the know, that were serious bettors at the time. And so they would have access to a lot of information, private clockers. That was something that was, at the time there wasn't very many publications. I think one of the first publications that came out was in 1975 was Handicapper's Report. And that was something that was utilized and that we got our hands on. I think there was a couple of guys that were that were mailmen that we knew that were at the track, and they would share the information with us. And they had like actually like a hit and ready list. They had information about workouts. Back in those days, Chris, they didn't have information about Lasix. They didn't have information about trainer switches. They didn't have information about geldings. They didn't have any of that information. So that was the thing that was, that's the things that you were trying to look for, and you were always looking for an edge. And that's the things that we around these smarter, older gentlemen that we used to hang around, that they were getting information about. That was like in the mid '70s. So there was like fit and ready lists. There was workout reports, or somebody would get some steam on a horse, and that's what you were always looking for. And back in those days at the track, you had to be careful, because when you did go to the track, there was always touts, and there was always people trying to sell you things just walking around, and you had to learn and decipher who those people were. But I think that's what kind of differentiated myself back in those early days. And I think the other thing too was I became serious about betting. I would never consider myself or say that I was a professional gambler, but the one thing I could say is, because I had started working early when I was 16 years old, I always risked my disposable income, even back in those early days. And my entire life, I was never afraid to gamble. And if it was horse racing, I gambled on everything: sports, dice in Vegas, you name it. I've tried it along the way. I've learned over the years that those games are tough to beat, and I don't gamble on those games anymore. I think horse racing is a game that you could become a winning player at, and I've always looked at it as I'm always trying to, even to this day, even today, to have continuous improvement and always try to improve my game. Even today, like at Los Alamitos, I took a tough beat, but I know how to manage through that. That's probably one of my best strengths is you take a tough beat and how to move on. But if I think back at some of this, like I can think back at a story when I was with my friend Jeff, and we were 18 years old, and we drove down to Del Mar, and I don't remember how the day was going, but I think I had like $54 left in my pocket, and he was busted, and I said, okay, you take 14. I gave him 14, and I'm going to keep 40. And I says, and I had to use the restroom, and I says, okay, you handicapped the race, and it was a feature race of the day, and I'm going to handicap the race, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss the race. And it was a horse called To Be or Not. It was ridden by Eddie Delahousse, and the trainer was Ron Ellis. And it's funny because when I see Ron Ellis, I kind of smile. And we talked about the story together, because that was the first horse that he ever trained. And then we both bet him, and the horse paid $9 that day. And so obviously, I had 180. And then what happened the next race was it was the last race of the day. And one of the things that I learned about just hanging around these older gentlemen was most of the people back then, they would just gravitate and bet the favorites. And you would see everybody, most of the people that went to the racetrack, that's what they would bet. And that's something that I learned at a really young age, was to be a contrarian and to not to bet the favorites, and to kind of stay away from the favorites. And sometimes I'm guilty of probably like going against the favorite too many times. And I've had to learn that when is the right time to use or bet a favorite. I've never bet or even used like horses like Zenyatta. I never used that horse like in a pick 5 or a pick 6 or anything like that. I would always go against those horses that were like big odds on. But then what happened in the next race was both Jeff and I, we ended up hitting an exacta with the 25-1. I think it was a 25-1 shot and a 4-1 shot. And I actually bet it twice And then I think I collected around $5,000, and he had it once. And then, when you're young and you just want to gamble, right? So we drove from Del Mar over to Hollywood Park Harness, because in those days they had harness racing in the West Coast. It was didn't start till 7:30, so I think we got there later. And then that was something that I enjoyed, harness racing. And then I ended up having a big day at 18 years old. I think I cashed. I came home with about $25,000. So think about it, being 18 years old, right, and making a big score like that at such a young age. I was really hooked. I was hooked on betting horse races. I wasn't afraid to gamble and like I said, to just really stay away from betting favorites and taking the risk and the chance to make a score. And then we would bet them all. Like, even I remember at that young age of 18, driving to Los Al every night. So to bet the quarters, right? So back in those days, they had quarter horse racing, and it was Monday through Saturday, before they had simulcasting. So we would go there every night. Obviously, the meet wasn't a year long like it is now, because they also had harness racing there as well. But we were always looking for somewhere to go gamble. I never got involved in poker or anything like that, but I loved to gamble on horse racing. And if it was double header or whatever track we can get in our car and drive to, we would do it. And then and we would enjoy it. And then we were degenerate young guys, always looking to gamble. And like I said, I always worked, and I would never miss work, but I would always go to work and then, shoot off to the track. And then the weekends we'd do the double header all the time, no matter if it was, thoroughbreds to quarters or thoroughbreds to harness. We would figure out a way to get there to gamble.
That sounds like fun. So anything that's equine that runs, you'll put some money down on that. Doesn't matter what the breed is, I guess. What about Arabians and mules? You play those as well, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have some really. I've had some days where now you can't get, now they don't have the mules, but I've had some days where I've taken down the pools with the mules, when they used to have the mules on the fairs in the first race. But yeah, I mean, you could give me a form or give me something right now, and I would go at it. As I've gotten older, I've had some discipline now, and I really try to stick to just a few tracks. But then as I go along, back in those days, I go along in my career, at those age, you even, what do you do when you turn 21? You just say, okay, I'm going to go to Las Vegas now. So then you start betting on sports, and you try to look for an edge in betting sports. And back in those days, I always go against the grain. I always go against the public. That was always something that I always did. Like, I always went against the obvious, and a lot of guys use numbers to bet. And this is even with horses, but even in sports, the same things, where a lot of sports betting is done on emotion. But so back at that young age, you would take trips to Las Vegas because you could bet horses and you could bet sports. And then I would also like to bet. I like to throw craps back then when I was young. And then I had a really good job at the time, and I was actually working for my family in construction. And there was a truck driver, and he happened to know of a place. And he told me, he goes, because at the time I moved from Alhambra to San Gabriel, and he said, hey, there's a bar over right by down the street from where you live, where if you want to go make a bet on a game. And I said, oh, there is? And he goes, yeah, I'll swing by and pick you up. So I'm about 21 years old at this time, and so I remember him picking me up, and we going there, and there was a cocktail bar, and
we had a little bit of a technical glitch, but hopefully this will still make sense when I edit it afterwards. And Leo, just take up where you left off. You were telling us a little bit about how your game evolved and, how you got involved in other types of gambling beyond just racing, and kind of you were getting to how that it kind of led to where you are today. So why don't you pick that right back up where you were?
Yeah. And so I was talking about how there was a place that was actually a cocktail bar close by my house where you could go and make bets on actually sports and horse racing, illegal bets. And I started patronizing the place, and then actually got in with the people that ran it. And the guy that ran the place, he actually couldn't drive, and I became his driver. And to kind of make a long story short, I was working in construction and kind of was tired of it. And he asked me, "Hey, you want to run a spot and and take action and take book." And this was interesting. This wasn't just, most people, when you talk about being a bookmaker, you talk about, taking phone bets and that sort of thing. These were cash spots back in the early 80s. And so basically what people would do, this was before, there was any kind of simulcast betting. So people would come and place bets and put cash down. And then after the races, you would get paid. And then people that worked, they would leave their bets and then come back and cash later. And the guy that I had worked for, he really taught me like so many things about betting and how to treat customers. And to make a long story short, I did that for about 7 years. And during that time, I stopped gambling, and because that's what he taught me. He says, "Look, you're gonna be able to make some money," and it's interesting to this day. Many of the people that used to come in and patronize where I had taken action, I see them at the racetrack to this day. And then what it did for me too is it just taught me a lot about customer service, how to really treat people, and I was able to parlay it into the profession that I turned into. Which for the longest time I was in IT support, and I was able to have a really good career doing that while I bet on horses throughout my career. But then that career you can only do for so long. And then I moved on into betting. And then when I got back into betting on horses, I was really serious about betting. And I think that's where, when I got back into betting, I really took it real serious. And I always looked at betting as like, I always said that it's the only game in town where you can be right and still be wrong. And I think when you look at gambling on horses or betting on horses, you always hear about people picking winners, but then, which sometimes is easy to do, but then coming up with a winner or coming up with, is how do you make those bets, or how do you extract money, from races where you could become a winning player? Because most people, when they go to the track, they end up losing, and it's difficult to become a winning player. But I think if you apply, and you listen to shows like what Chris has, and listen to some of the people. I think you mentioned I'm the 20th person here. I think you could listen to all the podcasts, and you could take from everybody that's on these calls. You could learn something from each one of them, and you could take. You could have a lot of good takeaways from them, and hopefully today you'll learn something from me that you could take away and leverage and use as a tool, so you could be successful. So one of the things that I really focus on when looking at cards today, and you could apply this to any racetrack. I think when I went back and started, I used to bet a lot of tracks, a lot of racetracks, and I think that becomes difficult. I think over the years, I try to narrow it down to now, and later in my life, I really just like to look at like the West Coast tracks. And I also do still look at the quarter horses at night, only because I've been betting those since I was 18 years old. And so I have some, I think I have an edge. when betting those. But one of the things that I always look at any card that I look at, where I try to find the strength of the card, and I use race shape. And then everybody has different tools that they use. A lot of people use figures. I think there's a lot of people that are using. There's other tools that are out there. I'm starting to see AI tools that are starting to show up. That's becoming big in technology today. Not sure where that's going to land as time goes on. But I really focus on when I look at a card, and I'm an old school guy, so I still, I use the racing form. I use the printed old fashioned racing form, but sometimes I don't get my hands on it, so I'll go online and get the ones and print them out. But what I do is I'll look at a card, and I'll look at each of the races. I'll look at the condition of the races, and then I'll go start looking at the race shape of the races. But one of the tools that I really like to use is I like to use the workouts. I'm a subscriber to Andy Harrington workouts, and then obviously he only does West Coast. But the racing form also has workouts you could purchase for other tracks. I think, and then there's other workout tools that you could subscribe to. I think Bruno DiGiulio, he has workouts for some of the other tracks that he provides the service for as well. But I like those, and not so much for grades, and not so much for what grades are high, but really to eliminate horses, to find out if horses are fit and ready to be able to perform at their best ability. So that's some of the things that I really look at, and then I look at the race shape of each of the races to see where I think where I could see how the race is going to shape out. And then obviously one of the biggest things that's been mentioned on a lot of your podcasts too as well is just look at where I could find where favorites are vulnerable, right? So where I think I could beat the favorite, I think that's where you're going to have your best success and get your best results and get your best outcomes. And especially too when you could find a race that's a large field where you think maybe the A and B, like the first favorite and second favorite, are something that you don't like, and you think that they're not going to perform well, and then that you want to figure out, okay, what type of race am I going to play? Like for me, I'll play whatever I think is where I can get an edge or where I think I can make a score. So that becomes pretty much any type of bet. I do try to stay away from the lower denomination bets, like like the pick threes, 50 cents, that sort of thing like that. But there's times when a try or a super in a larger type field becomes a good bet. Or I do like to apply the lower takeout pick 5. I'm pretty much in every day. That's something that I will look at and I will bet pretty much no matter what. That's where my focus is in each race card. Good example today. I played the early pick 5 at Los Alamitos, and then I had actually had missed, and then I came back. They had a middle pick 4 and missed, and then kind of wrapped it up for the day. And one of the things, I thought on today's card was a good example of where I thought a lot of the favorites were vulnerable in the first 30 races. And then when the fourth race came up, I thought the favorite was pretty solid. And then I went against the favorite in the fifth race. So I was live going into the final leg of the pick 5, but I had missed because I didn't use the favorite. And I think, one of the things that I think that's important to do is, so when I got back into racing, I think one of the things when I got back into, in that early age, when I'm like early 30s and into 40s, I think one of the things that I was guilty of is I was afraid to lose. Meaning, a lot of times you would spread, or you would use caveman tickets, and you would spread quite a bit. But at the same time, I did learn how to bet multiple tickets, or to have a pick five, 4 or 5 times. But then when you looked at in the long run, what would be challenging is when you start looking at how much money you would spend on these tickets. In the long run, you would be a loser, but you would make good big scores. Like, I could go back and look in my 40s, and I had countless scores, but then in the long run, I was spending too much money on those tickets. You see a lot of people post tickets today, and a lot of people are guilty of that, where they'll spend a lot of money to get a score, but then when you look at those and you multiply, man, if this guy's betting $400 and $500 tickets every day on a pick five, man, he sure has to hit a lot of those scores to make those hits. And so I think that's where over the years, where I talk about where you have to like reinvent yourself, or you have to really fine tune your game, or you always have to have continuous improvement when betting. And even to this day, that I think that I've done that. So if I look back over those years, I probably, although I could tell you like numerous scores and different types of, all types of betting aspects, I think at the end of the day, I probably was losing for many, many years. And I think there was a big turning point. I think for me too was, one of your guests inside the Pylons, he did a podcast years ago with Jason Beam, and he talked about a lot about betting and like not betting plays, and about really getting in granular about making good bets and what good bets are and what bad bets are. And I think that was a real turning point for me. And I think that really helped me and strengthened my ability to switch and become a winning horse player. And I think that's. I don't want to tell a little bit of story about how about getting a little bit more in depth about that. I'll tell that a little bit later. But and then everybody has different tools. Like I've heard on here, a lot of guys use the numbers, the sheets, and those kind of things. And I think you could have success. I've tried everything. I've used all the tools. But I've settled on the workouts. I think one of the challenges we have in our industry is that the cost of all those tools, and then to overcome those costs, I think that's a big challenge that we have within our industry. And we could talk a little bit later about a lot of the challenges that we face within horse racing, and how that's a big challenge. How there's a stranglehold on the data, and you've had many guys talk about that as well, and that's a big challenge. I think when it comes to for us to strengthen our industry and to make it better, and to not so much attract new people, but to bring the people back. I think there's always a focus on bringing new people to the racetrack, and not so much to focus on all the people that left and just gave up and quit and just took their gambling dollars somewhere else. But that's where, that's kind of like where I focus on when it comes to betting a card. And I want to get in a little bit more in depth about that. But that's where I think it's important to have, the tools that you need, and to figure out to create an edge. But going against those favorites, I think is something big, and really understanding where you're going to attack a card, and where you're going to find something to find the type of bet where you're going to be able to extract money and make money for the day in the card. And then you have to have discipline to do that. You can't just go in and just start betting everything that every track. And that's what I did. I think when I was in my 30s and 40s, I bet everything. I would start off betting pick 4, pick 5. I bet exactas tries in every race, and like I said, I think I did pretty well at that, and I can I could tell you about the days where I've had big scores, but as I've gotten older now, I think I really try to redefine that to where I want to be able to, at the end of the day, become a winning player. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you talked about how you started taking more of a long-term view and looking at, what are smart wagers, and not being afraid to lose. So can you be just a little more about that, specifically how you actually changed the way you would bet before to how you bet today? What are some fundamental things you do differently that, turned what maybe sometimes were big scores, but long term wasn't a winning approach, into what you think is more of a winning approach long term?
Yeah, a good example of that would be really getting away from caveman tickets. So for example, in a pick 5 segment, a lot of times I've gotten to the point where today is like, if you look at races where if I'm going to bet against the favorite, right, I'll take the favorite and I won't use the favorite. And then what I'll do is I might group together horses in a multi-race wager, where I might have 2 or 3 horses that I'll use. But then when the favorite comes up, like so previously, what I would do is I would take, let's say I was going to use 3 horses and I would go against the favorite. But what I would do previously is I would still use the favorite. Right. And so then what would happen is when you get to the end and you tally up what your ticket costs, it would be so expensive. Right. And then so what I would do now today is I won't use that favorite. And then when I get to it, and then what I was buying tickets, I would buy tickets with just throw all the favorites out in a 5-leg race, multi-race. Right. And then I would miss one where the favorite would win. And so what I do today is if I like a favorite, right, what I'll do is I'll single the favorite, right? And so what will end up happening is now the money that I might have spent, I can go ahead now and and buy the ticket multiple times. So if I'm right, I'm going to get rewarded for that. So that's a good example about what I did before compared to now. Or if you look at this maybe in a exacta race or let's say more of a trifecta race, where I might bet a trifecta where an exacta, I would just automatically box an exacta, where today I'll look at the wheel pace and I'll just bet a straight exacta and then bet it for the double amount of what it cost me to box it. So if I'm right, I'm going to get way more rewarded. So if you look at that in the long term, right, I think that at the end of the day, I'm going to come out more ahead, or I'm going to have more winning days. And the days that I have the more winning days, I'm going to get way more rewarded. So I'm going to get rewarded for when I'm right, a lot more better than if I'm boxing. Or in a trifecta, I might put a horse on top, right? And I might use 2 in the second hole or 3 in the third hole, where maybe before I was using 4 or 5 in the third hole. So I'm buttoning up the amount of horses I use and then betting multiple tickets and so if, like I said, if I'm right, then I'm going to get way more rewarded for if my opinion is right. And that's the thing is that I really focus on now, is just trying to find out where I have a strong opinion about a race. And if I don't have a strong opinion about something, I'm passing now compared to back in those days, I would just fire. Right. So, I mean, I played in the tournament yesterday in Los Al, and that was the thing. It's like at the end, normally I probably would have shoved in just to shove in at the end to try to win, but I didn't have a strong opinion. So I kept the bankroll I had, and I ended up finishing third. And then I picked up third prize, where probably the old person that I would have just shoved in and I wouldn't have had the horse that won, and I would have lost. And that's the difference about, I think, becoming a winning player and just, being a degenerate and just gambling, right? I think hopefully I think those are really good examples of where you could kind of see the vision in front of you about trying to become a winning player and not just gambling to gamble. That makes sense?
Yeah. So you didn't change the way you handicap at all. It's just the way you bet. And you were trying to make sure that you sort of focused your capital where you had your strongest opinions. And if you didn't have an opinion before, you used to fire anyway, now you'll pass. So that probably improves your long-term results right there. But even in the races you play, you're trying, you're not afraid to lose. You're trying to make a score, and you're trying to sort of maximize your long-term ROI. So you're kind of doubling down on your best opinions and sort of passing on some of the lesser opinions, so that if you make a score, you make a bigger score. Now you might lose sometimes when you would have won the old way, but in the long term, you think you come out way.
I think so. I have to, I do keep track, like most of the people that, everybody that's on your podcast, keep track of your betting, so you could look at that, via Express Bet. You're, able to download and massage all the different type of bets you make and what your strengths are. And then too, the same, I think, some other strengths that I have that I do that's really well is like today. I mean, I think the lowest payout I had today in the pick 5 was 8,000, and I got beat. I made the wrong choice, and maybe 7-8 years ago I probably would have had that, right? And I would have got 5,900. But I think in the long term, I think I would have lost more than 5,900 over a 52-week calendar, just betting so many bets to get that. And what I've learned, if you want to have a bad beat conversation, I have some really, pretty bad beats for, pretty high six figure bets. But what I've learned, and I do really well, is I learn to move on. It's like I just learn to move on and not get caught up in that, because I think that negativity gets you nowhere, and it just takes you down a path where it's gonna make it real difficult for you to win. And speaking about those things, I think there's some real important things when you gamble on horse racing. I think that's real important. Like I like to go to the track. I mean, I think a lot of the people now bet from home, but these things are important. I think even if you go to the track or you get from home, it's like I prepare myself, ahead of time. If I go to the track, I get there way ahead of time. I get there early. I do like to be alone. Like you mentioned about the Eddie Logan Suite. I don't go in there as much. I like to be by myself. I don't like to be interrupted. I like to be really focused on what I'm doing, because all those little things and distractions, a lot of people you get around, they want to talk and have conversations about things. I have a certain amount of time where I allow that to take place. But then when I'm getting to time when I'm going to make those bets, and a lot of times I'll be all prepared when I get to the track. I know pretty much exactly what I want to do, what I'm going to do, and what I'm going to bet, where I'm going to really focus on. But I think you have to. I think those are like really, really important things when you're gambling your gambling dollars, is to really be, really be focused on when you're making those bets, and just having that, just being prepared and not try to cut corners, and put the work in. However you decide to develop to develop your process that you have in place, that you really want to take that time to make it to your advantage, so that you don't have anything that you don't want to go back and say after a while, this guy interrupted me, or this, this, like all these different things. Because I'm superstitious in a lot of ways, but I just don't like the interruptions and things like that. And so if you're playing from home or wherever you're playing from, it's just, get yourself prepared and don't cut corners, and put the work in. Because I think if you put the work in, you're going to get your best outcomes, instead of just like, okay, it's 10 minutes to post time, and you start thinking, oh, I'm going to start betting, and then hope you get lucky.
So I want to circle back to a couple things you talked about earlier and how they influenced you. And you said you kind of worked as a bookmaker, or at least taking bets, taking action, and you were taking action on all sorts of bets from different people. Is there anything that you learned from that really stuck with you and influenced you, in terms of the way you approach betting on races today, that you learned back during that experience?
That's a great question. I think there is some things when I look back. I had most of the people, most of the bettors I had were, 2, 5, 10s and $20 bettors. I did have bettors that made larger bets, and actually some of them they even participate in the NHC, and those guys and some of them were really good. And I think getting back to your question, I had some guys that would bet parlays and round robins, and they were really, really successful, and they bet prices. So they didn't bet they would bet like a 5-horse round robin, like 2 win 2 plays. Right? This is kind of bizarre to think about this, but this always stuck with me. And so now you have today where you can go and bet parlay cards, right? And now you have multi-race bets. But back then we didn't have. Back then all you had was. I think back then they just introduced. They didn't have trifectas. They only had exactas, and we didn't have pick threes. So this was before there was even multi-race bets. And I think, and then also the thing that I learned about the most was I think that the favorites didn't win all the time. And I think subconsciously, and I think that's where I got a lot of I think that's where I got a lot in my head, like just bet against the favorites all the time, because they're not going to win all the time. They're going to win some of the rate, they're going to win. What do they win today? 30% plus. But I think one of the things I learned from that is like, I'm not betting the favorites because they don't win all the time. And so in the long term, if you bet favorites, you're not going to win at this game. So I've always bet against the favorites. That was probably like I had mentioned earlier, not so much a downfall, but when I got into multi-race bets, for the longest time, I would just throw all the favorites out and then try to make a score that way. But I've learned now today that you can't do that today, especially in today's racing, because this, what is it? A lot of them, like 35% or so, I think is the average, somewhere around there. So I hope I answered that. I hope I answered that right, because I think subconsciously, and I think that's where I got that from, right?
So the other thing you mentioned is you still do this. You still play the quarters, and you played harness. The harness racing. Is there anything you learned from playing harness racing or quarter horse racing that carried over into the thoroughbred side? I'm just curious.
Not so much. Not with those. I don't. Nothing I could think of at the top of my head. But there's one thing too that I wanted to mention about racing today too that's different. You know, for so many years I never handicapped jockeys. So I never I would bet horses. I did consider trainers. So I really look at trainers. And I've always looked at trainers for the longest time. But this last year, especially at Santa Anita, the colony had dropped way off, and I started having to look at jockeys and start really thinking about playing not using certain jockeys because of their efforts were so poor. So
that's interesting. Relatively new that you're.
Yeah, that's something that's been new. Now coming up this meet for the first part of the meet, you know, the jockey colony is going to be a lot stronger. But when you get past, you know, when everyone goes to Keeneland, there's a big drop off. And then I think there was jockeys that were riding that were not 100% and still riding, and there was just some of the efforts that they had, and you know, I have the most respect for the jockeys, and I'm never gonna tweet anything, or I'm never gonna complain about a jockey's ride, but I'm gonna when I make a bet, there's certain jockeys that if I'm going to make a large transaction or go to a large transaction window, that I have to. There's certain jockeys that I won't do that with. Where
so you're
5 years ago, it didn't matter. If I liked the horse, I would just go to the window.
Well, that's interesting. So you're not. Is there any particular riders that you want to call out that you think are particularly good or particularly bad, or keep that close to the vest?
No, I'm not gonna. I'll leave it at that.
I have a feeling that I could come up with your list because I you. Nothing more.
I call them bus drivers. That's what I call them. You know, like a guy that goes to work and drives a bus and has a route, and he just goes and drives his route, and he gets off just does his job and rides and collects a check, and that's it. But it's a difficult trade. I mean, it's like, you know, these guys put their life at risk, so that's why I wouldn't want to call anybody else. So.
But when it comes to investing your money, you're careful about who you're going to trust on the horses that you.
Yeah, when I have a strong opinion about betting on a horse, I have to make sure it's the right rider. Where
all right, so let's.
Oh, go ahead.
Continue. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just have to make sure it's a rider that I have confidence in.
So it sounds like the pick five is a big part of the game now, and the horizontal play is kind of your focus. So why don't we talk a little bit about, you know, what gets you excited about a pick five, what you're looking for in the sequence, how you deal with situations like, you know, a vulnerable favorite or a strong favorite or an obvious spread race, you know, just kind of any insights into the way. It sounds like you spend some time really thinking about how you structure the tickets, and when you use multiple tickets, how you do that. You know, are you pressing? Are you backing up? Doing both? Just kind of a little bit more of the technical details, if you're willing to share that, in how you put together pick five bets, because those have become very popular, and it's probably the hardest bet there is out there. So, you know, I think, you know, you talked about how you haven't really changed your handicapping much, although you talked a few things like the rider emphasis, but you really have changed the way you bet. And I think the importance of the betting side becomes greater as the
pools and the wagers become more complex, and the pick five's kind of at the high end of that. So I think spending time talking about how you structure those tickets might be of real interest to the listeners.
Sure. So, so like I mentioned to you, I play the West Coast now, but again, you could apply this to other tracks as well. I think one of the things, one of the things that's a challenge on the West Coast is field size. But I'll still bet the early pick five pretty much no matter what. But basically, if the field sizes are small, what'll tend to happen is that means I'll bet a higher multiple of ticket when it comes to betting it. But what I'm looking for, and I think what you have to know based on the track that you're betting is, I think one of the things that's important for you to know is to really understand like the different angles that your trainers tend to leverage or use. Some trainers are good with horses off of layoffs. Some trainers, I can remember back 20 years ago, like horses that dropped, they didn't win as much as they do today, where now horses are dropping all the time to get wins. Like understanding those stats and understanding the condition that the race is, I think is super important. But what I'll do today is I'll get the like I mentioned to you, I'll get the workouts, at 7 p.m. Pacific time the night before, and I'll take those and I'll read through each one of the comments, and then I'll make my own notes in each one of the horses. And what I'll try to do at that point is really eliminate horses at that point. And by eliminating horses that may not be fit based on the comments in the workouts, trainers that I might not use, and then I'll look at the horse that the Morning Light odds maker has made as the favorite, and obviously the second choice as well. And I'll look and see if there's any vulnerability in any way that I think that they're vulnerable. And so I'll look through that sequence. And a lot of times I won't even look at the rest of the card. I'll just look at that first sequence and really focus at that sequence. So a lot of times what they try to do on the West Coast is they'll put a grass race and maiden 50 Calbred or a maiden 50 race there. And so that's what I'm focusing on, and that's how I'll start looking at the segment of for the pick five. And so what I'll do is I'll look at that and I'll see, and I'll make a check mark on the amount of horses where I think that can win, and I'll go through each one of the races, and then I'll look at that, and then I'll jot them down, and then at that point I may have to eliminate even more. But where I'm really looking for is where I think the favorite is vulnerable. And then if I'm going to single the favorite, it doesn't have to be like he has to be 1-9 or 2-5 or whatever like that. But if I find a favorite in that sequence, I'm gonna single that. I'm gonna single that horse. If I find where there's like 2-1 shots maybe that are going to take most of the action, I'm not going to use both of them. I'm going to use one of them. So these are all the things that when I go through a pick five segment, I'll look at. And then I'm and then if I don't like A and B, like the first choice and the second choice, and let's say it's the 8-horse field, I might use 4 horses in that segment, especially if there's something I don't have a strong opinion about. So if I look at each race, I'm looking to see if I can find where I have a strong opinion about a horse. So the strong opinion might be someone that might be that's working really well, that maybe can on a comeback one race. There's certain angles that I like. I like horse that has speed with blinkers off. I've had a lot of success with that, and usually you get a price a good example. There was a horse like that yesterday in the tournament in the first race yesterday, in the early part of the at Los Alamitos. He ended up going off at 40-1 in the tournament. I bet 200 to win on him. And he ran second. If he wins, I think I take down the tournament, right? So that's an angle that I like, that I really like. And it doesn't matter who the trainer is. That's something that I'll use and play, 100% of the time. I don't like horses that sprint, that stretch out, that close. I'll never use a closing sprinter on a stretch out. So I have all these angles in my head, and that's what you, as a player, you have to develop those or learn those over time, right? So that's the stuff that you develop in your tool bag, that you have for the racetrack that you like to bet at. And so that's how I'll attack a card, and then I'll jot down, I'll put something preliminary, kind of like a ticket, and lay it out, and then I'll kind of see where it lands. So if it's, maybe it's, 4 by 4 by 4 by 3, by 2 by 1 or something like that. Because let's say the last race is I think I have a strong opinion about, and I think he'll win, and maybe that comes out to be, $144 ticket for $1, right? So what I might do with that, right, is I might play that for 144, and then I'll go back, and then what I'll do is I'll look in there where I think in a couple of the 2 or 3 races where I could take the horse that I like the best out of the 3 that I picked, and then I'll start making, like in the first race, I'll take, let's say I like one of the horses. Let's say I pick 3 horses, but I like one of the horses best. Then I'll come back and bet a ticket with that horse that I like the best, and I'll make that ticket where it's just singling that horse, and then I could bet that multiple times. So that's the kind of approach that I kind of take when putting the tickets together, because what I want to be able to do is, if I'm right, if I pick those races all right, at the end, I might have a ticket that's worth, $6, or worth not $6, but I say $3, where I have it 6 times, and then so I'm going to get rewarded if I have it right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So your starting ticket is sort of that's got all the contenders that you've trimmed down to what you think is your core ticket, and then any other tickets you do are like pressing one or more of the opinions in that. So you're going to hit core ticket plus this ticket, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're not like playing a second ticket that's a backup that you're including horses you don't have on your primary ticket, or do you do any of that?
No, I don't do any of that. I've never done like I don't do backup tickets or anything like that. When I have an opinion, I just stick with it. Yeah. So the ticket, the horses that I like, I'm not going to play a ticket and use other horses, because I'm not going to do that. No.
All right. So you come up with your core ticket. Is there like a kind of what your base ticket needs to be? Is there like a range that you play in that you stick with, or does it just depend on the sequence? Just curious on that kind of ticket, not your full play.
It depends on. I don't have a number that I go after. What drives that is how many. It drives that is the field size. What drives that is the field size. So like today's a good example. I played 270 today. I played 1 ticket, 50 cents, 270 today at Los Alamitos. That was a good example. And I didn't play anything. I didn't play multiple because I thought it was going to be pretty pricey. And it did come out that way. I don't know if you saw the results today, but it was it ended up paying $5,900.
So if you think it's going to pay big, it's kind of wide open, and you're like you think there's several vulnerable favorites you're leaving off, you may just play that one core ticket, figuring, if I hit this, it's going to be a score, and I don't really have any strong opinions to press, and that's kind of what you did today.
Yeah, but if I did, I did that today because I didn't have any strong opinions earlier in the card. So like in the first, second, and third race, I didn't have anything. In the earlier races, I didn't really have a strong opinion about anyone. So I didn't.
All right,
so I didn't really press it.
So let me ask some more specific questions. First of all, I got to ask. You gave two great examples of angles that you like. One is, you love playing a horse that has speed and they take the blinkers off. That's a positive. And then you had a negative where you don't like playing closing sprinters when they stretch out. Do you have any other angles like that? Because I'm sure the listeners would love any more of those you're willing to share that you might have.
Oh, God. I probably have to have a form in front of me now. I'm getting so much older. My memory's not as strong as it used to be.
Well, you don't. Any more that you remember that are
Yeah. No, those are the bleakers off. The bleakers off's been really strong as of late. That's with horses with speed and this is if you're looking for something, just some kind of change, right? Some kind of change in the horse's something that's going to change your horse's performance. I think is something that you want to look for. Obviously, a lot of people, the gelding is something that you want to look for. I like the gelding when they come back and all of a sudden the workout changes, right? I mean, I think if a lot of the listeners, like I like on the workouts, like I see like the grades, and this goes for anybody that has workouts, that provides workouts. It's like you might see a C grade or a C plus grade, and then all of a sudden the horse is working out in a B grade. I think that's something that I like, that I note. I think you have to in workouts too. You have to look at gaps. See, there's a lot of information that we're not privy to, or we don't get to. But like I like to look at workouts. Let's say there's gaps in workouts. Like that's a big negative for me. So one of the challenges we have on the West Coast is they have San Luis Rey, and we don't have no clockers there. So what I'll do with those works is I'll look at the dates of those works, and I'll note how many days apart they are. A good example yesterday in the feature race, that Coach Prime, he had won. He had broken his maiden, stretching out of Del Mar, and then there was a gap, and then he worked out, and then there was another big gap before he worked, and so I did like that. Obviously, I think he ran third yesterday, but those are things to look at that I think that are important. So you see gaps in work, so you see horses that don't show up to work. Now these are obviously maiden horses. That's important to look at. When you look at your older claimers, some of them don't work or don't work as much. I think that's something that's super important. And then one of the angles that I like, I'll share. Here's a really good one. About 2 years ago, if you're playing the West Coast, this is only West Coast for the people that play the West Coast. Previously, horses that ran at Los Alamitos, they were restricted to the thoroughbreds. They were restricted to 5,000 claimers that ran 4.5 furlongs. And then about 2 years ago, they came up with these 1,000-yard races. And when they came up with the 1,000-yard races, they were able to run conditions that were past 5,000 claimers. So all of a sudden you have horses that are running for like allowance 18,000, and you'd see horses that ran in stakes races at Santa Anita and Del Mar that were running at Los Alamitos. And if you played Los Alamitos these 6 days, where I played with both hands during these 6 days, because I think you could find an edge. Previously, this is the 10th year that they've had racing there. Well, previously to these 2 years, you would never find a 4.5 furlong horse winning a race because they were 5,000 claimers and below. But when they changed the ruling to the 1,000 yards, that opened up the class level, and so now you're seeing horses win those races, and then now you're seeing those horses win those races not only at Santa Anita and Del Mar, where I've caught some big prices, that huge prices that won at Del Mar and Santa Anita that come off those 1,000-yard races at Los Alamitos. That's a great angle to keep an eye on those horses that come over. And the way that you can focus on them is the trainers. There's a couple of trainers that do really well. Morphe is one that comes to mind, but you can look at the times of the races, and you can just check out the speed ratings even as well. And if you even want some help for me on those, my Twitter feed is @Vukman, and so anybody that ever wants to contact me about any questions that you have, I'm always available. So just wanted to point that out as well. But that's been a huge angle. I've caught $40, $50 horses. I made a couple of big pick five scores with horses that paid $40 and $50. That were Los Alamitos horses that were coming off 1,000-yard races that ran at Santa Anita and Del Mar. That's a great angle.
Yeah, that is a good one, because typically you see, these quarter horse kind of distances at Los Al, and you toss the horse, right? And you're saying, hey, you can't do that.
Automatic. Yeah. You can't do that anymore. Yeah. There was one.
Great.
I think today the horse that won the first race, the $50 horse that won today the third race, the horse that won the first race. I can't remember the horse from the second race today. That they were all horses that ran at night that won during the day.
That's cool. Anything else? Those are all really great angles. Any other angles?
Yeah.
We don't have to provide any more. That's some good ones, but I'm sure that the listeners would be mad at me if I didn't ask you to try to pump you for any information I can get.
Yeah. That's if I come up with anything, if I remember any more, I'll let you know.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the pick five and some specific things. You kind of mentioned in general, but I want to hit on a couple things. Kind of go back over it. It sounds like when it comes to favorites, if it's a strong favorite, if you're going to use it, you're going to single it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
All right. So you're not going to, like, if you're going to use a favorite, you're not going to be using other horses. You make a decision. Either I like this favorite enough to single it, or I'm going to toss it. That's kind of the way you approach it.
That's the way I started to approach it, and I think I've had good success with that. Okay.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to make sure.
No. You're not at all. I think that's what I and I think because for so long I would just toss them all, right? And then for a long time I would toss them all, and then I started using them all. In other words, just I would find three horses, and then I would put them in there with three horses, and then when you start adding up those tickets, they get expensive, right? So, I really focus on that, because then what it allows you to do, it allows you to have purchase multiple tickets more times, instead of using. like let's say if I like a favorite and then I use 2 more horses, right? Until now, what I could do is if I just single him, right, I could use it. I could have the ticket 3x instead of just having it once. So let's say it pays, let's say if it pays 500, right? I'll get 1,500 instead of 500. That's the way I'm looking at it.
No, that makes sense. So let's talk about other things you said. If you have like a race where there's 2 horses that are sort of vying for favoritism, and it looks like one of those 2 is going to win. They're going to be about the same price. You're not going to lock it up with both of them. You're going to pick one, typically. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Oh, you pick one of them. Yeah.
All right. So again, that's being you're again you're sacrificing maybe your hit rate, but you're on the payoff you can bet more, and so long term you think that's a smart decision, even though maybe half the time you're going to lose where you would have won if you played them both, but long term you're going to make a profit, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Correct. So and then if you are spreading, it sounds like if you're going to spread in a race, we know you don't include the favorite, because you already said if you can play the favorite, it's going to be the only one you play in the leg. But it sounds like you don't even want to play like B and C typically, or at least B. If you're going to be spreading with a lot of horses, you're probably typically going beyond like the A, at least beyond the favorite, or how do you deal with that spread races?
Yeah. So if I think the second choice is strong, or I end up on B and C, I'm not going to use B, C, D, E, right? If I look at if I'm against A and B, right, then I'll use multiple horses. I'll use if I have a strong opinion about all the other multiple horses, I'll use as many as I think can win. But if, let's say in a race where I think the second choice is strong, I might use as many as 2. I'm not going to use a whole bunch, because the second choice obviously is not going to be obviously won't be the favorite, but it's not going to be a big price. So I'm not going to, if I have a strong opinion about the second choice, right? He might end up being, he could be a single as well. But a lot of times, if I have a strong opinion about a second choice, I might use another horse as well. So I might go too deep with a strong opinion. Yeah, I'm not going to spread.
Right.
No.
So if you're going to include the second choice, you have to like him some, and you might single him, or you might maybe add 1 or 2 other horses in. But you're not going to be spreading. If you're spreading, that means you're probably trying to A, B, and maybe C kind of thing, right?
Right.
And if you're playing like 4 or 5 horses in a race, you're not going to be including the favorite for sure.
Right. If I'm using 4 horses, I'm not using A and B.
Okay. So your spread means that you feel like you can get past the top few. If you want to use that second choice, you've got to like him, and you're probably going to lean on it pretty heavily, maybe even as a single.
Yeah.
So what about if there's a price horse that you don't think's a lock to win, but there's really a lot of value? How do you deal with that price horse in the sequence?
If I have a strong opinion about a price horse, and especially if it's early in the sequence, right? I'm not afraid to single that horse, or maybe use one other horse with that horse. But I won't go more than 2 deep if I have a strong opinion. But most of the time, if I have a strong opinion about a horse, if a horse is like 10-1 and I have a strong opinion in the first leg, I'll just single that horse. Especially if I'm making like a win bet on the horse, I'll single. I'm not afraid to single that horse. So what I like to do is I like I like to have more strength. I like to be like thin at the. I have a tendency to do this is thin early and kind of have more horses late. I tend to subconsciously do that. Does that kind of make sense?
Do you think that's a good thing or not, or just that's what you do? But so I think if that 10-1 is in the last leg, right? I might have one or two other horses with him. I don't know if it's good or bad. I think it might be good because I think most people hate to get knocked out in the first couple legs. You know, they don't want to be dead on that first leg in their pick 5. So I think the general public has a tendency to do the opposite of what you're doing. So it probably gives you a little bit of an edge. I can't say I have data to back that up. But, like going thin on that first, maybe not so much the first leg, because there are people who, will go thin on that first leg and then they'll play the pick 4 if they get knocked out kind of thing. But like in the second leg, I do think, it might be something to your approach, but that's just speculative on my part.
No, I've always been that way. And if I'm betting doubles, like I'll bet if I bet doubles, I'm just betting one horse to one horse. Or if I'm betting pick 3s, I might bet single 2. I'm never gonna. I don't spread. Like I won't bet pick 3s and doubles and spread.
You're real tight. And I was going to ask, do you play the other pools when you're playing the pick 5? So it sounds like you will maybe play doubles and pick 3s, even if you've already played the pick 5.
I won't pay pick 3s, but I might if I like a price. If there's a price horse like we just mentioned, a 10-1 or so, I'll play a double. But they'll just take a shot with a single horse to a single horse.
So you're really tight on your doubles.
Yeah.
When you play.
Yeah.
1-1. What about the pick 5? Do you always have at least one single because of the math, or are there times where you might play a ticket without a single?
I'll play a ticket without a single. I don't have to. I don't never approach the pick 5 saying I got to find a single. I never do that.
So you just let it kind of whatever comes out, dictate it, and at the end you got to decide if you had any strong opinions that it's playable. But if you didn't find a single, but you have good ticket structure, you'll go with that.
Right.
All right. Anything else on the pick 5 or horizontal wagers that we haven't touched on? That was good discussion on that. Anything else on that? Or any other advice you might give people who play the pick 5?
No, I think I think we covered a lot of area there. I think one of the things in the industry that frustrates the hell out of me is that a lot of the what tends to happen in the pick 5, especially the lower takeout. And you know what I love that you always do for each of the racetracks when they open up, you always give the takeout. You always post the takeout. And what they tend to do, right? All the tracks they have a low takeout pick 5, and then they have obviously they put the low takeout in the early part of the card, and then they that's where they'll put the smaller fields. And then if you count them up, there's 31 horses, and then the back half of the card has the late pick 5 will have 40 plus horses. I think that's one of my big frustrations. And I've the track that I mostly bet, I've been pretty vocal about that. And I think one of the things that I think is important for racetracks is that you can't start off your race card with a 5-horse, 6-horse field. And I think you need to have some strength early to get people to want to come and bet your card. I think that innovation when it comes to This is probably a long conversation, Chris, but I think that's one of the things that frustrates me. And then they'll come back and say, oh, look at the pool size is bigger in the late pick 5 with the higher takeout. Well, that's because the computer assisted wagering guys are probably pushing more money into that, obviously, because they're getting bigger rebates in the higher takeout. And then you have the people on the East Coast as well. I think that's probably one of my bigger frustrations, because I'm looking to take it, for an edge. And I think that's an edge when I'm, being able to bet into a pool that has a low takeout. So that's probably one of my big frustrations. And I think later, I'd like to talk a little bit about the computer assisted wagering. I have
Sure.
An interesting take on that and what's happening today, and how it needs to be changed, right?
Yeah, well, so it sounds like you're not a big fan of the 23.5% takeout on the late pick 5 at Santa Anita, or I think I might not have it.
23.6. I'm not excited about anything. 23.6.
Right, that's right. I don't have all those numbers, but
I know by heart.
Yeah, it's 15% for the early, so that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And certain field size helps. Kind of, you see it all the time when it comes to takeout. The larger fields, it's not as big a deal as it is for smaller. But like you see these, sometimes we get a match race and you have 2 horses that are below even money.
Yeah.
That shows you how takeout's just a killer on these small fields. So I'm with you there. Obviously, I'm kind of a takeout hawk. And I do try to inform players, because I think a lot of people don't realize how big those things can vary from track to track, and even from the early pick 5 to the late pick 5 at the same track. So it certainly is something that you should be aware of, at least when you're making your wagers. But let's go ahead. We don't need to wait. Let's talk about let's hear what you have to say about the computers and the teams.
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, this has become the hottest topic, and I was hoping to. I know they had at the symposium, they had a panel, and obviously they probably weren't gonna, the people that they had on the panel, they probably weren't going to get in depth about what really happens behind the scenes, right, and what really is happening today. But let's talk a little bit about the technology. So I'm a technology guy. I've been in technology and support for 35 years, and that's supporting infrastructure, which means the infrastructure, the technology that runs networks. So like when you go to your office network, that type of technology, or you go to your company technology, that I have a lot of experience and background in that. And so when you look at Racetracks, one of the things that the Racetracks unfortunately didn't do over the years was they never invested any kind of capital or any money in the technology for the Racetracks. And that's pretty much including everything. So the Totalize Data system has 1980 technology. A lot of the technology, even the point of sales technology at a lot of Racetracks is super old. And so what does that mean? That means that the latency, or the time that it takes to process all the bets and everything else, it takes seconds to get done. And this is causing a lot of challenges and a lot of issues, because we're seeing the results of the impact when somebody makes a bet. And I think the last thing at Del Mar was really kind of like was I wouldn't say the last straw, but because we keep betting into these pools, but they had I think 3 or 4 occasions where there was significant odds drops. But this has been going on for a long time. These teams have been betting for I think 20 years, and they bet billions of dollars, and I don't think they're going anywhere. And the Racetracks are not going to stop having them participate. I think one of the challenges is that if you look at, if you go back and look at some of the things, if you kind of compare it to what was happening in the stock market maybe 10 years ago when it came to high frequency trading, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened, but CBS did it. They actually did a show regarding this about, I think 9 years ago. And they talked about how they were having a challenge where there was some of the traders, they were intercepting some of the trades that were being made from a lot of these different companies. And so, in the way that they did that is they built the infrastructure to be able to do that. And I think this is where the racetracks need to really take a better look at what's happening. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you how it's set up, but my understanding is that, and maybe you might have some insight too, but that these guys are they're making their batch bets probably after, I'm going to make an assumption here, after the public is done betting, so that they could level off their bets, so that they can basically hopefully break even. So when the rebates are made, that they're making, that's how they're making a significant amount of money. And I think that's where the challenge is. So since the racetracks never updated their hardware, never updated the applications, the betting systems, we're really paying the price. And the perception is that there could be something, that there's maybe some manipulation in the pools and manipulation of what's being bet. And I think in today's world, there's opportunity now for the racetracks to be able to do something about that. Meaning they don't have to purchase equipment on via capital expenditure. They could do it via operational, which means they can someone out there, a racetrack out there can first could go and update all their equipment and not have to put out a bunch of cash, but can pay by the month over a length period of time, which would be able to not have to take a hard blow. But I was hoping to hear or listen to what was said at the symposium about that. But I remember back when I used to go to Las Vegas and you used to make a bet, and then when they put the first horse in the gate, you had to stop betting. But I think the tracks, they're afraid to take that risk because they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose handle by delaying any type of cost. And I think the other thing too is the big challenge is when you're comparing it to the stock market, right? The stock market is overseen by the SEC, right? So they had to make a lot of changes when it came to high frequency trading. And you can look this up, and you can just Google high frequency trading, and you can Google CBS, and there's actually a gentleman. He was working at a Canadian bank, and he actually uses horse racing to describe what they were actually doing, and they were intercepting a different all the different and I'm just going to say bets, but I'm saying all the different purchases for all the different stock, the people purchasing stock, and they're intercepting those. That was happening to him, where he was buying shares, and he would go to buy the shares, and then the price would change. And so the SEC, kind of stepped in and overseen it. And then that's the thing that's happening with the CAWs, is that, who's overseeing this? The racetracks are. So I think there has to be a call to order. There has to be this has to be addressed in some way, and there has to be a way to get this latency so that it's fixed. And somebody needs to step up at one of the big tracks and look at spending that money that they never spent. And I don't know if that's something that they're looking at, or there's something that anybody's thinking about. I know when Ritvo was at Santa Anita, he was looking at purchasing, redoing the software so that you can, if you wanted to bet a pick 5 and you wanted to not use a favorite, that you were able to, that was something that you were able to, that they were able to do if they would, rebuild the software, right? And I think there has to be some changes when it comes to that, because there's if it just continues the way it is, what people are going to do is they get frustrated, and then they take their gambling dollars somewhere else. And there's all these things that are continuously to happen that keep frustrating the players. And how long do we hang on? I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts about? What is your insight about what I mentioned?
Well, let me kind of summarize. So you feel like if they could improve the infrastructure and the architecture, maybe go to, like you said, some sort of cloud-based architecture. I mean, they could do it without having to reinvest and totally buy everything new. But if it came up with better infrastructure and it worked faster, less latency, that would kind of eliminate the perception of late odds drops to some degree, because
they would have to buy new infrastructure. They would have to buy new equipment, but they wouldn't have to. The difference is today, like Cisco networks, instead of you going out and spending millions of dollars, right, in one lump sum as the capital expense, what they're doing today for all the different big companies is they're allowing you to buy it by subscription and pay a monthly fee over a long period of time. So you don't have to take out millions of dollars out of your pocket. Does that make sense? So it's not a cloud based. It's all new network infrastructure that goes over the internet.
So that would help some, but it still doesn't keep the teams from having that price discovery that the players don't have, like you say, and see what basically like front running in market trades. They see all the trades that have been made, and they get the final trade and final price determination, and they get those huge rebates, so they get a price discount for having the privilege to see make the last bid. It's not going to change that, right? I mean, if they have better architecture, they're still going to do that.
Right, but what you're going to eliminate is you're going to eliminate all the odds drops after the race goes, right?
Right, right.
So in other words, you're going to,
you'll see them drop right when the gates open rather than when they hit the quarter pole or the finish line.
Yeah, and I think that's what they have to. I think that's what they have to do is they have to eliminate that. In other words, they have to eliminate that odds drop. They have to somehow eliminate
during the race.
I think, during the race or after the race starts.
Well, they've done that. They just don't show the odds anymore.
Yeah,
it's like they made it go away. At least now you can't. When they do that, you can't show the clip on social media where the odds change, during the race. They do. Yeah. They just don't show it on the screen. Now, I'm not saying every track does that, but I've noticed a few of the tracks, just stop showing the odds in race odds. Yeah. That's their solution to the problem.
Right, which is really insulting, right? And I think that I think it has to be addressed, and I think it has to be, like, who's the governing body? Is like the CHRB. I mean, like, what is it? I listen to CHRB meetings where they talk about it and they say, well, it's an 8-second delay and they're trying to get it down to 5 seconds. And I mean, it's like, they're managing it, and who knows what those teams are negotiating. right? I mean, they're able to negotiate and know, and the public, it's not shared with the public. What's actually being negotiated. I mean, a good example, but a good example is, a good example too is, and then they had getting back to takeout, they had this, like Santa Anita came out with the turf, the turf pick, the turf pick 3. And then they did, Gulfstream offers a low takeout, right? And then you had Keeneland offers a low takeout, and then Santa Anita, they didn't offer the low takeout. And all they're doing is fueling the, the CAWs. All they're doing is giving them another avenue, right, to be able to extract more money out of that pool, by having a higher takeout. Where if it's a lower takeout, obviously they don't get as big of a rebate. So these are there's so many things that need to be addressed. I mean, I think one of the things is that you're on Twitter and I'm on Twitter and I follow a lot, and this is one thing I learned, ideas are cheap and execution is expensive, right? But we don't have all the key stakeholders from the 3 major organizations, like working together in any way. I mean, I brought something up, regarding like Formula One. They just took over the whole city of Las Vegas, and they have one CEO. I don't know if I follow motorsports. I followed it my whole life because my brother's been in MotoGP and he's worked for like 5 world champions. But here's a sport that people watch these cars go around, and they market the product unbelievable. But you could almost like look at like the car being the horse and the driver being the jockey, and they've done like a tremendous job of really marketing their sport. And like they have a 2-car team, and then they have, like, people don't realize, like, that 2-car team, it's like 1,300 people to manage that 2-car team. But they have one CEO, and they have a plan, and they spend 500 what was it? They spend like $500 million to put the race on in Las Vegas, and they spend billions of dollars in this industry, but they get it back in return, and they turn that city upside down, and the people had to suffer, but they're going to continue to move on. And I'm just using an example of just like having First and CDI and NYRA not working together. Eventually it's going to come to it's going to be a challenge to continue this game that we play, right?
Well, you've kind of touched on issues that are with the sport and with the teams and some other things. So I like to ask the guests, I might as well ask it now, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and make 1 or 2 changes, not every change you could think of, but what would be the first 1 or 2 things that you would do to try to improve things?
I think that just what I mentioned about. I think getting those leaders getting them in a boardroom, to getting them together. And I don't know if they ever talk to each other, or I don't have any insight to that. But I think that's where you have to start. In order to be successful. I mean, we've had somebody just appoint himself to be like the CEO of horse racing. right? I recently, right, on Twitter, I noticed that.
Well, it's outside, but Mike Rapoli has appointed himself commissioner and hired Pat Cummings to lead the charge, to make positive change in the sport. Not sure where that's going to go, but it's real. It's beyond social media for sure.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that I think if I think that's where it has to start. I worked 20 plus years for the largest consulting company, and I was fortunate enough to be in those executive leadership in the role that I had as a tech support executive. I was in a lot of those board meetings and executive leadership meetings, and when they had these kind of challenges, they got in there and they sorted them out. And I think that's what needs to happen is they need to, the three companies, and then you could even include Oaklawn as to get into a room and start working together for the good of the game. I think that's where I would start, and just just try to take some of the low hanging fruit, some of the issues that come up. I mean, look at what happened yesterday. I've had a lot of text messages, and people reach out to me about like the inquiry that happened in New York yesterday. I mean, like that, that there's no accountability for the outcome of what happened with that, and there needs to be accountability when things don't go right. There's when things don't go right, or things don't happen, or like we were talking about the CAWs. There's nobody really explaining what's really happening and what they're doing today. Nobody really knows exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. What we do know is that they are making a significant amount of money at the end of the day, which is.
So let's follow up on that. I mean, they're out there, they're successful. How is that, or has it changed the way you play and the way you bet? How have you responded to that?
I don't bet as much. So my handle has gone way down.
Is that just because you find the betting opportunities now? I mean, so you just don't see the value. I'm curious as to what drives your handle down.
I used to make a lot more win bets. I've kind of stayed out of those pools because you don't know what you're going to get. And I think Los Al did something that was pretty. I mean, they did something that I normally would do myself. So every race, if I was going to make a win bet, I would go look at the wheel pace. I don't know if you saw what they did for the 6-day meet. They projected what they thought the win payouts would be based on just a total math equation based on what the wheel pace, using the wheel pace, what they thought the payouts would be. I don't know if you happen to see that. They did that. They would show it. They'd show it a few minutes before post, and they would show it like when the horses would come on the track, and they called it in play, and they put a disclaimer on it, and it actually said in play projected closing odds, and it was totally based on the wheel pace. So if there was a double, pick 3, pick 4, pick 5. Mark Ratsky, who works at Los Al, just would do the math equation for that, and then they would display it. And it was, I think it was helpful. I think it's better than nothing, because if I was going to make a win bet, I would look at the wheel pace to see what I thought who the favorite would be, because a lot of times the CAWs, they might hold. They might not make a bet till later. And then the other thing you have to remember too, it's when the odds go down, it's not always the CAWs. There's a lot of there's players and there's other betting teams that out there that bet significant amount of money. I've seen some posts of some people that not so much lately, but I've seen people that make some significant bets that would change the odds that they post on Twitter. So it's not always CAWs when the odds go down. That's just something to keep in mind. But I don't know.
I was going to say you've seen your handle go down mainly because you sort of moved away from some of the pools where you can't reliably bet like win and exact. It's really hard to see, get a good feel for what your price is going to be. So you just kind of avoid those pools. That's sort of why you've seen your handle drop.
I think the win bet is the biggest one. I mean, the exactas you can kind of get a feel for, but I think the thing though is, like even on the wheel pays on the exactas, and you think you're going to get something, and then that changes too as well. I think over time it's gone down. So if I look at like when COVID hit, the first part of COVID, I didn't play for probably the first. I didn't play for like 4 months. I stopped playing just to kind of see where things were at. But then in 2000, what was it? 2021. I'd probably bet the most money I've ever bet. And then 22 was pretty. That it's dropped off 22, and then this year is going to be a bigger drop off. So
what?
But I stayed out of the win pools though. I stayed out of the win pools quite a bit.
So that you've just kind of avoid the win pool. That's sort of what you've done to try to deal with that. You feel like in the pick five, you still can get value, and you're still firing away. But in the win pool, you just don't. The price changes have kind of driven you away from that.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple of the questions I want to touch on that we kind of hit a little bit, but let's circle back to those. You sound like you've learned quite a bit on the betting side over the years. What's kind of the biggest lesson learned that you would want to share, with somebody else? You say, hey, you're getting started. Let me tell you, this is one thing I learned that I want to let you know this, so you don't have to learn it the hard way that I did. What would that be?
I'll tell you an interesting story. So when COVID hit, when COVID hit, right, everything pretty well stopped. And horse racing did though. Some of the tracks, they were still open, and there was betting. I think I remember I can't remember the name of the track, but betting still kind of like existed. And
Will Rogers,
and there was a couple other tracks, but I just just because he didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But I don't know if you knew Alan Dickinson, or he went by Dink, and he was a professional sports bettor. And he was a friend of mine, and he was very social. And so he was telling me, he's like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't go nowhere. And he would go out, he would talk to his friends. And so I, as a technology guy that I am, I says, well, Alan, you got to get Zoom, right? You got to get Zoom software. So I told Alan, I says, okay, here. And so I I sent him a link, and we got on a Zoom call, and I told him, you got to go buy the Zoom software, and let me show you how to use it. Well, if you knew him, he was very technically challenged, right? And so what happened was, I says, the type of guy that I am, I'm the type of business that I always like to help people, right? So, and so I told Alan, I says, I realized that he couldn't figure this out, right? So I says, okay. He wanted to have a couple of Zoom calls, and he wanted to invite some friends. So we started doing some Zoom calls, him and I, a couple of nights, and then he started inviting his friends. And as it turned out, we did 100 Zoom calls, 100 nights in a row during COVID. And one of his friends that he invited was inside the pylons, and I had already knew inside the pylons. I knew inside the pylons from my when he started. He cut his teeth at Los Al, and if you listen to his podcast, so I already knew him, but I hadn't talked to him for years. And I actually heard him on Alan used to do a show, and I heard him one time on this show that he used to do on Tuesday nights. And so a lot of times, what happened on the show, so this is 100 nights, and we get on for like 3 hours. And Alan had who's who of sports betting and gambling on a lot of these calls, and then, like I said, ITP would come on, and so I was able to get access to him, and we had a lot of conversations. And he really, and this is like March of 2000 we started, and he totally, if you listen to the podcast on Beanie Show, or you listen to any, like your show, any of the shows, he's very articulate. He's one of the smartest bettors I've ever come across, and I learned so much from him, and he really helped me become like a winning player. And he probably could explain, he's explained so much of these things, and that's where I learned so much from him. So, like, and that's where I learned about really kind of just minimizing my tickets and make them smaller and making good bets. And so having access to him, and a lot of times people, we'd start off, and then people would leave, and then I would just have one-on-one time with him, and I was able to ask him, a lot of questions. Now, he wasn't on there, every night and stuff, but Alan was on, and he had different people on, and then I still have calls. I still have calls after all this time, but that was a key thing, and that's where I really learned like really a lot about just making good bets and good tickets, and minimizing bets, and then making them so that they're multiple, and really thinking about making everything you do long term, and really thinking about it's okay to lose. Or one of the things that I've always and I think this is something I learned that I've always been really good at. It's like I said earlier about like having a tough beat or having a bad beat. It's like just moving on to the next leg or the next race. And then one of the things that I've been doing too is I branch out where I try to find like a strong opinion about something. So I'm looking at other races too, at other tracks but I'll look where I just have a strong opinion about something and try to find something where I could bet. But I learned a lot on really how to make like good bets, and then what are bad bets. Like, so not using like a big, like that, betting too many horses, or like taking in, like I said, making a 3-horse exacta box. Like I would do that a lot of times. And then at the end of the day, I would, in a 3-horse exacta box, there's times when that might be a good strong bet if there's three long shots, but a lot of times that's not a good bet. And I learned that on those Zoom calls. Like I learned a lot of little things like that. And if you go back and listen to the podcast that he's done, or like he did your show, I mean, if you go back and listen to the show that he did with you, he gave a lot of insight on making good bets and what are bad bets.
Yeah, just for the listeners who maybe haven't listened to all 20 episodes, although shame on you if you haven't. Just we did have ITP Inside the Pylons on. I think it's episode 4, and he was great. Like you said, he's got all, he's very sharp and willing to share a lot of great insight. So yeah, I'd recommend people go back and listen to all of them, because I think all the guests have had something to say. But certainly, ITP was definitely, one of the more popular shows that we did. So I can't imagine how valuable that would be with guy Dink and ITP and others. You made lemonade out of lemons during COVID with that. That sounds great. Anything else came out of those Zoom calls that that you learned that you'd want to share? I'm sure we've already touched on some, but anything else that stood out from not just ITP, but maybe from some of the others that came on about betting?
I think no, it was just it was you at the time you couldn't go anywhere, but obviously the different people that I was able to meet along the way and stay in touch with and develop relationships and friendships with, I think was was obviously that's the thing that I really enjoyed. And unfortunately, we lost Dink. He ended up passing away, but he was a legend in the sports betting market, and he had an incredible life. And he had a movie made about him and a book written about him. And so there was later on, I haven't made a sports bet, and I can't tell you how long it's been, because I just thought it's too difficult to. Although I still follow it quite a bit, I just think it's really, there's so much information out there, and it's really challenged to win at. And I was able to pick up a lot of information about just understanding the game a lot, just trying to just have continuous improvement for my betting and betting strategies. I think that's probably the best outcome I could say when it comes to what I learned on those calls.
So kind of in line with. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, and then like I said, the friendships.
Yeah, it sounds like you've developed relationships that you continue to this day. I guess it hasn't been that long, but seems like it's been a long time, but it's only been a few years, really.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that players make? This the average player, that if they could correct that would really make a big difference in their results.
I think one of the things is I think something we touched on is like not to be afraid to lose, right? And not be always attracted to like the favorites. Like I see so many people that think that they have to use the favorites. Or they bet a sequence, and then they'll have a good opinion about horses in a race, and then they think that, oh, I better use the favorite just in case he wins, so if he wins, I'm still alive. Or you touched on a perfect thing that I see a lot of, where, oh, I want to still be alive, so let me use 5 horses in this first leg, so I just want to still be alive to get to the end. Where like I'm always thinking I rather be like single or thin early, and then start over again. Like I never played pick fours. Like I'm not a big pick. I mean, I'm a pick 4 player like at low sal early pick 4 or late pick 4. I'll play those pick 4s. But I'll never play a pick 4 where there's offered where a pick 5 is offered, because I get my stomach turns when I see the price what the pick 5 paid when when there's a pick 4 offered. I don't play pick 4s. But I think the biggest mistake people make, and we have racing experts that'll play tickets. You know, a lot of the stuff that you see on TV will be, you know, real strong or hurt heavy early and then a single at the end, or because they want to stay alive, or what'll happen is they'll put the favorite in just to have the favorite. I think that's the biggest challenge. And then I think the other thing is I think racetracks need to do a better job helping their customers. So when it comes to like simulcast and simulcast feeds and data, and we haven't touched on rebates too much, right? There's people getting rebates in California that's real challenging. But I go to Starbucks and I get points, right? I mean, the racetrack's job is to keep people so that they don't have to go to their ATM all the time, right? And if they can keep people churning, that's what they want to do. So if I'm running a racetrack, I want to keep people there at my racetrack betting. So I want to give them tools. I want to give them whatever I can give them within the limits that obviously that's not going to cost me, that's not going to break the bank. But I think, all that needs to be all reinvented. I mean, you have different feeds. I mean, you have your simulcast feed. That's super important to your racetrack. So the information that you're putting on your feed is super important to help your customers be successful. You want your customers to win so that they could churn, so that they could keep betting, so they could keep showing up every day that you have racing. Those are the things that I think that are important for racetracks to be successful. And I don't know, I think a lot of times they get away from that. They lose focus on that.
So I give one example of what they could do, you think a racetrack could do that would be helpful to its customers?
I think the biggest thing that they could do. I have a lot of different things. Probably, I think the most important thing is if you're talking about customers that come on site or customers that are participating via like their ADW. I think if you're talking about customers that are coming on site, I think you have to offer up. There's two folds. Let me take a step back. You have so many customers that have left the game, so you have to focus on how are you going to bring those customers back? And then you have, how do you bring new customers to the racetrack, right? Those are two questions. So, and then you have customers that are showing up. So when somebody comes to the track, you have to make that environment for them so that it's enjoyable, and then so that when they go there, they want to come back. So everything has to be driven from a customer service aspect. So when you drive into the parking lot, you want to be able to make it so it's easy. You want to be able to make it so when they come and they enter the racetrack, if they've never been there before, there's somebody there to help them to figure out where they need to go. A lot of racetracks take all that for granted. People don't know where to go. That sort of thing like that. How do you make a bet? Some of the racetracks, they used to have ambassadors. Some tracks don't have that anymore. So a lot of times people go for the first time and they go to their seats and they don't, there's those challenges that take place. So I think you have to hit the reset button, and from a standpoint of, is like, hey, this is your customer and you have them here and you want to focus on doing everything you can to have it so that it's a great experience for them so that they come back. So you have to offer those things to them. You have to offer, like if you go to Del Mar, they have that newcomer seminar. I don't know if any other racetrack does that, right? So you can come there and learn how to make a bet. I remember at the software company I worked at, I got it all planned out, right? And they're all young. They're all like from, out of college to 30 years old, right? So and there's like 100 of us on a bus. We go down to Del Mar. I have a brown bag lunch. I teach about everything you want to know. We get down to Del Mar. The first thing that they do is they take their wallet out, they take their debit card out, and they swipe the debit card. The card. Where we swipe to use a card for the the betting card that we use for the tournament. So they swipe their ATM. They swipe their ATM card there because they want to make a bet. They think they can swipe their ATM card there. I said, oh, and I forgot. I didn't even think about this. Oh no, you got to go to the ATM and get money out to make a bet. And they said, oh, forget it. I'm just going to eat and drink. So the younger generation, right? If you want to have them participate in horse racing, you have to cater to what they want. They want everything on their phone. They want to walk in, they want to purchase with their phone. They want to be able to order from their phone. They want to be able to do all those things. Now that's a new customer, right? But an existing customer that comes all the time, you want to make it so that the experience for them is so that they come back and that they're appreciated for them showing up there. And I think a lot of times, I'm not going to get into like details, but that gets sometimes overlooked quite a bit at a lot of the racetracks. And I think a lot of times, too, think about the employees there. They've cut down so many days. They don't, there's morale issues at racetracks. There's, I'm just not talking about like the racetrack I go to, like all the racetracks. There's challenges everywhere you go. So I think you have to kind of hit the reset button on that, and then really kind of focus on, getting, really taking care of the customer, giving them something back. Focus on helping them win, right? Focus on trying to help them figure out a way so they can learn the game and win some money, and not just make it an entertainment kind of factor, so that they can continue to churn when they bet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They first have to acknowledge that they have customers and that they respect their customers, and which I think is the challenge for some of the racetracks. They don't even know who their customer is, and they think of the bettors as being sort of a necessary evil, a bunch of degenerates. And it sounds kind of crass, but that really not. I'm not talking about Santa Anita here, but
no.
Some of racinos that are really have racing just because they have to in order to maintain a casino don't put a whole lot of emphasis on the product and the customer, and for sure.
Yeah.
And and typically there's not a whole lot of on-track customers at those places. So not surprisingly.
No, I have a friend that's back east. He tells me, "Oh, the racetrack is not connected to the casino, and they make you go all the way around to if you want to go between the racetrack. Like they don't want you to leave the casino. They don't want you to go to the racetrack. You know, so they have issues. They have issues everywhere. Like I never worked at a racetrack. I don't know, but I've worked. You know, I've worked in business, and I service customers, and I've always, you know, from a tech support perspective, and I look at, you know, from the CEO down to someone that's an intern. I give them the best service that I could give them, and the people that work for me, that's what I coach and teach them. And I think that's what the racetracks have to look at and do. And there's challenges. There's unions. There's a lot of challenges that the racetracks face in order to get that done. I know for me personally, like when I go to the racetrack, like you know, Santa Anita has a concierge, a VIP concierge, Tom Quigley, and Tom Quigley, he goes all out for someone like me. He's incredible, not only for myself, but like I'll tell him, hey, I saw this guy going, you know, coming to Santa Anita for the first time on Twitter, and he'll reach out to that person and go out of his way to make a great experience for that person. You know, that's the kind of things that racetracks need to do, and he does that for. I mean, I've had, you know, personal experience like numerous times of people that come to Santa Anita for the first time, and he was able to help them. And they, you know, he doesn't know that if they're $2 bettor or what kind of bettor they are. You know, he's willing to go out and try to make a difference and to have people have a great experience. And that's what, you know, that's what racetracks need.
Yeah, I'll second that. Racing could use a lot more TQs for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're getting close to wrapping things up, but I want to make sure we haven't missed any topics, or there's anything else that you want to share that we haven't covered. You know, this is a chance to weigh in on anything else that we haven't hit on that you want to talk about.
No, the last thing I wanted to say is like the one thing I wanted to share with you is again, I appreciate you having me on. The effort that you put in, you know, to make a difference in the game. I appreciate what you do, and you know, I continue to always, you know, look out for what you have to, you know, your input. You say, you know, the stuff that's going on with the racetracks, and then, you know, the stuff that you do with the NHC. You know, we didn't talk too much about that as well, but just wanted to thank you. And the one thing also is like I love horse racing. I would never change anything in what I've done in my life when it comes to horse racing. Like I told you from the beginning, it was something that I think I was destined to be a part of. And, you know, regardless of what happens, you know, there's never a bad day being at the racetrack. Like I just grew up at, you know, near Santa Anita. That's my place. And, you know, when somebody says something bad about it, I always try to defend it. And and if anybody ever just, you know, comes from out of town, and you know, wants to, you know, make a trip, just go ahead, and my handle at Twitter is @Vukman. I'll do anything to make it a great experience, even as far as picking you up from the airport and bringing you to the track. I mean, I love betting. I love gambling on the races, and I love being at the racetrack. And thanks again, Chris, for having me on. It was a pleasure being on your podcast, and an honor as well.
Well, this has been great. And thank you for being on the show. And I just want to echo what you said about, this is the greatest game, definitely the best skill-based gambling game. And despite all its best efforts to screw it up, racing it's still the greatest game. It's just, it's just frustrating for you and me and other players, because we know it could be so much better, but we love it because it's such a great game. And even with all its warts, it's still the greatest game there is. And it's, and that's what keeps us involved. I have people ask me, well, if it's such a messed up game, why do you keep playing? And it's hard to explain why in a rational way, because it's such a great game,
Yeah. It's funny. Two people tell me about complaining. Oh, you complain. I says, yeah. I says, listen, when I stop complaining, that's when you have to worry. I says, I'm always going to complain because I want it to be better. I want it to be better, and I want things to be better. And there's a lot of times I wish, that I could have a job in racing, and that I can make a difference. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but I'm willing to go out of my way to help contribute to make it better, and if people have a good experience when they come to the racetrack. I like that. There's nothing better than to see people come to the racetrack and enjoy themselves. So
yeah, and Santa Anita is one of the best tracks in the world, and it's just a great place to spend a day. It's such a great place. I mean, it really is a gem in the racing world for people who haven't been there. If you're ever going to California or want to make a trip somewhere, Santa Anita is definitely a good destination if you're interested in, horse racing, for sure.
I agree.
All right, well, that'll about wrap it up. I want to thank you again, Leo, for the great conversation and for sharing all your insights with the listeners. And I want to thank all the listeners out there for, your support. I really appreciate it. And I know the people who come on here appreciate it as well. And most of all, I want to encourage you all to boldly go where no horse player has gone before.